Hi, I'm Kathleen from Zen Art, and today we'll be painting macarons using watercolor. So this is fairly easy. You can make it as detailed as you want, or you can just paint just a little bit of the details. So it's up to you. But today we're gonna go somewhere midway. I tend to paint realistically, so you don't have to follow me. And anyway, this is the photo that I'll be using. Okay, so just a stack of 3. Hi, Narida. Thank you for joining. So today, it's just macarons, just a stack of 3. You can even start with 1. And then you can work your way towards doing a lot of them. They're very pretty, so you can actually make a whole collection, a whole box. But it's good to start with just 1, or in this case 3. They're perfect, a good set. And then you can also choose the colors. Some they create darker macarons with darker shades, and some with really pretty pastel shades. So again, it's up to you. If you can find another photo that you'd like to use, your favorite. Yes, they're just amazing. Every time I pass by a bakery or a store that sells macarons, I can't help it. I have to stop myself half the time. Otherwise, I can't stop myself from buying and eating. They're wonderful. I love them. And they're the perfect bite size. So you can just have 1 and it's fulfilling. But of course, it's hard to stop at 1. Okay, so I usually have my photo on an iPad or my phone near me, and I just look to it as a reference. So with my reference photos, my tendency is not to follow it exactly. So it's just there to guide me composition-wise and maybe a little bit of the color. But feel free to tweak the colors and everything else. So it's just basically your guide. So personalize it all you want. Okay, so I'm gonna put it here to the side, my photo. You can also print it out if you'd like. And I also shared my sketch of this. So if you don't want to do any sketching, you can print it out. You can practice on that. If your printer can handle thicker paper, you can print it out directly on your watercolor paper. But then make it more gray. Just be careful, of course. The drawing might show. So for example, I did mine already. So I did just the basic lines, basic sketch. And then I made it dark so that you can see it now. But before I start, I'm gonna dab on it using my kneaded eraser to remove the darker lines so that they won't show through, since these macarons are lighter in color, not too many deep layerings. Okay, so enough with my talking, and we can start. Okay, so I'm gonna flip my camera down and I'm gonna turn on my lights so it's gonna be brighter. Okay, there. Okay, so I'm gonna be flipping stuff around, so stay with me. Okay, there you go. So then I'm gonna flip it. Let's see. There. Now it's right. Let me just fix it. Okay, so that's perfect. All right, so as you can see, I'm just on my desk. And then I'm gonna zoom it so it's closer. Okay, because we're gonna be doing more details with this. So you can mix your colors with your palettes. You can even have just a limited palette, and you can create the colors that you need. For this, I'm gonna look at my set, and I think I'm gonna go with Allegro, because as you can see, it has a lot of the warm, bright shades. But then also Serena has the ones that I need. Okay, so depending, I'll have them both on nearby so that I can just choose whichever is appropriate. Okay, so here are the 3 macarons, like I said earlier, I just drew them darkly so you can see them. But then I'm gonna dab on them with my kneaded eraser. So that's why I love kneaded erasers, because I'm just gonna do this and it just softens the pencil marks without really removing them completely. So I'm just like pressing. So I love this eraser. I always have stock of this because sometimes I lose them. I forget where I put them. So your kneaded eraser is your best friend when you're sketching for watercolor and you want to lighten your sketch. Okay. Sometimes I forget to do this. If the layering is dark, then it's not such a big problem. But if you're going to be painting lighter subjects, then it's a good idea to also lighten your lines. If you're not bothered with the lines showing through, then, you know, then that's okay. All right, so from the reference, I'm going to start with the one on top. Okay, so this is like a pinkish, a deeper pink, not really very bright. Okay, so let's see if I probably use the Ochre rose, but then mix a little bit of brown with it, make it a little bit browner. Okay, so macarons are not so complicated unless you really want all the details. So I have my handy swatch because I'll test out my mixture first before I use it here. So no regrets. Okay. So I'm going to prepare a good amount. I have a tiny mixing plate. Okay, so again, getting my palette, the Ochre Rose. The thing about Ochre Rose is it's a nice bright pink, but it's considered not to be light fast. So if you're going to use this, then expect your work to look, the works that you use Opera Pink with, to like fade as it gets exposed to light over time. So that's the thing that, just think about it when you use Ochre Rose. So you won't regret it if someday your work starts to look faded. Okay, so now I'm gonna try to make some. I'm gonna try to kill the brightness, not kill, but maybe dampen it a bit. Okay, let's see. Let's use some brown with it. Okay, I'm gonna use some burnt umber a little bit, just to. Okay, so here I'm swatching. Looks better already. So it's still pink, but not too much. Okay, let's see. Let's swatch it some more. Okay. Okay, so I can use this for my second layer. So I want the brighter one for the first layer. So I'm going to mix it again. So it's good to have your colors ready. And to swatch them out so that when you're painting, you don't have to worry too much about getting the right color because you already blend them out. Okay, so I love that for my first shade, so I'm gonna use that, or first layer rather. Okay, so for the first part, I think I'm gonna do this in layers, drying. So it's up to you if you prefer the wet on wet, but I'm gonna do I'm gonna wait for the first layer to dry before I add. Okay, so I'm gonna bring this closer. Okay, there you go. So the source of light is coming from here, so I'm going to leave some parts lighter. So if you're more comfortable, you can use a smaller brush so that you can control it better. In my case, I like to use a good sized, mid-sized brush. Anyway, if the brushes are good, they will have nice tips, and you can just twist your brush around and you can still paint small parts. Okay, so I'm going to leave this part lighter. And then I'm going to go work down here. This is why I like working in layers, because you don't have to worry about getting it right in just one go. You still have layers that you can work on later. Of course, it will take more time and more patience from you, but it gives you flexibility. So if you prefer to work in one go, go ahead, of course. This is just my process. Okay, so here I'm color lifting some parts. I don't want them to be completely white either. Just the part of the macaron that is the highlight but still has the light shade of pink. So I do this a lot. So the color already stained the paper somewhat, and then I just lift it out to leave the highlight. So it's a softer kind of highlight, which is great for soft things and for soft lighting as well. Okay, so now the first layer is dry. It's a nice bright pink, and then the second layer later on will be a deeper one. So they're just going to layer on top of each other, and it's going to look nice. Okay, so for the next part, I have this green. So it's a nice pastel green. So I'm going to use this and lighten it, and then really temper it somewhat also, because it's very bright. Okay. So you can even just use any ceramic palette you have at home. Some people like to use just a one flat plate, and you can totally do that. I do that sometimes as well, especially if I'm using a lot of colors. Okay, so I'm adding a little bit of olive green just to remove the really bright green that seems almost neon. Okay, because this is more pastel. Okay, so I'm going to swatch it just to check if I like it. Okay, so nice. Okay. Again, I'm going to leave some parts here with highlights. So I'm not going to cover the whole part a darker green. And then, if you make a mistake, no worries. You can just color lift it. As long as it's wet, it's easy to do that. Even if it's dry, you can still lift it. It's just going to be harder. The thing about painting food, it makes you hungry, but they're so pretty. Food is really a great subject to paint. I actually also want to paint ramen. It has a lot of details, but it's also one of those foods that you want to be able to paint. As well as sushi. Sushi is also a great food topic to paint. So how about you? Have you gone into food painting specifically? And if you did, which ones are your favorite to do? Okay, so that's a nice light green. Again, you can even make the green darker if you prefer that, because I also saw some photos earlier that have these really nice green macarons, a deeper green. Okay, so for now, this is my first green layer. Okay, and then now I'm gonna go down here for the last one, which is this nice brownish orange. And the color burnt sienna is actually perfect for it. It's already here in the palette, so I don't have to mix anything. So this is what I love also about palettes that have everything, because when I feel lazy, I don't have to mix my colors. But it's also a good idea to start with a limited palette and then learn how to mix all the colors. That way, when you're traveling or when you have to do it outdoors, if you have to paint plein air, you can just bring a few colors and you can paint anything. Okay, so I'll prepare some, I'll do it here, I'll leave space. Okay, so burnt sienna. But I think I want the first layer to have a more yellow tinge. So I'm gonna prepare that. I'm gonna add some yellow to this burnt sienna to give it a warm underpainting, a warm first layer. And then I'm gonna mix a little bit of the deep yellow here. Just a little bit, just to give it that warm color. And then later on, for the next layer, I'm just going to be using just burnt sienna. The closest food painting. Oh, yeah. Okay. Oh, well, they're always a great subject. Teacups have just the perfect form. Just one teacup in one composition looks great. Especially if you have really nice teacups. Okay, so I'm gonna do my first layer here. I actually tend to paint people and botanicals, florals more. For acrylic, mostly people. I paint humans. That's my main subject. I love to paint humans. From the back, from the front, all sorts. But I find that lately, well, since I started with the World Watercolor Month and I started painting food, it's an interesting subject to go into as well. So now, this is my third or fourth food try. I've been enjoying it so far. Food can also be a little bit more forgiving because, you know, they look different. Even one serving, even each serving of the same kind of food, they look different. So you're not too stressed about getting everything the same or exactly right. As you can see, colors are just pale. So we're just setting the tone first. And then I'm actually going to add a bit of yellow directly. I want to have that, there's a warmth to this that I like based on the photo. So, you know, while you're working and you realize you want to do something, especially if it's still wet, everything is still very workable. This is what makes painting exciting, because, you know, even if you plan for it while you're doing it, there's still things that you just suddenly come to mind while you're working. There. Okay, so I gave it that nice little bit golden, and I think that's gonna look great. So with layers, don't underestimate the power of layers. What you do at the start, when you layer new things on top, they're all gonna contribute to the final look. And some people, especially when they're doing food, they want to use rougher paper, so it already has, it gives that when you do your brush strokes, it leaves that rough texture, which is also very useful for different kinds of food. Okay, so this is oh, it's kind of dried already, so I can add to it. Okay, so now I already have the second layer that I mixed earlier, so I'm going to use this one. Okay, so this is a deeper. I added more burnt umber to this. So if you want that darker brown, but it still has some warmth to it, burnt umber is a good choice. It's dark, but it still has that warmth. Okay, and then just add water if you want to. If you feel like you added too much pigment, and then just wipe it here. So useful. Your paper towel or your cloth is really essential. And then you don't even have to paint this, you know, smoothly, because, you know, you also want the texture. Okay, and then I feel like if I painted over some parts too much, I just color lift it again. So just work with your layers. Take your time. You can even, I actually recommend, you know, especially for before adding the final touches and the final layers, to take a break. Give your eyes a rest, because you'll see things better after a break. Sometimes you feel like your work is not going anywhere good. Sometimes it's actually just you being, you know, too focused too much into it. So just take a break and come back to it with fresh eyes. It's been so useful to me so many times, because we are so much great critics of our own selves that we need that break, really. Okay, I'm gonna darken under here, because where they go on top of each other, of course, there will be shadows later on. Another good thing to explore, not exactly food, would be drinks, I guess, but then they will be more challenging, because then they would come in glasses that are shiny, and it's also a different way of painting metal and gas reflection in glass, which I think would be a good thing to learn. So for next time, I think I'm gonna go with how to paint metal. Something simple, but good skill to learn as well. Okay, so for the next part, again, it's the green. So I'm just gonna create a darker mix here. Same mix, just more saturated. So I'm using aureolin green, and then added olive green to temper down the brightness of this green. So with greens, you can really mix all sorts of greens with your different yellows and blues. So it's good to explore your palette and see all the different kinds of greens that you can mix using different kinds of blues and yellows. So if you're not getting the green that you're looking for, you're probably mixing the wrong blues and yellows. So the color biases of your primary colors will make a difference to what kind of secondary and tertiary colors to get. So remember those times where you want a certain purple or green and you're just getting like weird shades. So it might be you're missing a certain blue or a certain yellow. So the best way to find out is to make a color mixing chart of the colors that you have. And we have a watercolor mixing guide just about that, and it already comes with printable charts that you can use and fill up using your own paints. So just go to ZenArt and look for our watercolor guide, because it has printable stuff already, printable color wheel, and two kinds of color mixing charts. Okay, it's actually a kind of therapeutic thing to do as well. You have your colors and you make charts of them, and then you actually discover mixtures that are, oh, this looks great. I have that. Some colors I don't fully explore, and when I use them in in the chart and mix them up with other colors. I'm so surprised at the shades that I get, that I can use actually. So don't be afraid to explore your colors, okay? If you feel like you see some green or some blue somewhere, that's what your eye sees, go ahead and do it. Each artist's eye sees things differently, and that's what makes our work special from each other. Okay, so second layer for the green is finished. This is actually deeper than the, it's a deeper green compared to the photo, but I wanted it that way to balance as well the brightness of the three. Okay, so now I'm going to go here, and like I mentioned earlier, the burnt sienna as it is perfect already. Here is the, this swatch of it here. See, really great, nice orangey brown. So I have it here by itself, and I'm just going to paint it directly. It's also nice painting macarons because they're quite easy, but they look really nice once you're done. Very fulfilling choice of subject to paint. Sap green, water dye. Oh yeah, actually sap green is really great. It's one of those greens that you'd really want in your palette because it can create all sorts of beautiful mixtures. Very nice green. Another green that I also like, that I also find myself reaching for, is Hooker's green, both in watercolor and in acrylic. Okay, so here I'm not covering all the yellow, bright yellow parts because I want that to show through. That's why I really added yellow earlier, because I want that golden yellow to show through. It gives the macaron a nice, nice warm look. Okay. If you're like me and you like to paint with coffee or tea, I'm sure you've already experienced a time where you dip your brush on the wrong cup. Yeah. That's our life as artists. Okay, so as you can see, I like to do the layering because I also like the texture that it gives. So you can have a more harder edge texture, but you can also soften it just by softening the edges with water. So I'm quite partial to this technique. But some people prefer to do wet on wet, and they're quite adept at it. So it's all just a matter of preference. But try to explore both so you can see where each kind of technique comes in useful. So for example, when you're painting trees, the dry brush is really very useful, especially for the trunk, for the texture. And also explore your brushes. Explore using your brushes fully, like that, and also on the side, just the tips. So one brush you can use in so many different ways. That's how I train myself. I just have, like, at the start, just 3 brushes. One for really thin lines, like the rigger brush, and then a good size round brush, and maybe a flat brush. Okay, so now it's time to add the details. Okay, so I will have to go and switch brushes and use a smaller brush for the details. Okay, let's see. Okay, I'm going to use this one. Okay, this is a number 2 round. So I like the detail brushes because they have this grip part in the handle, and they're really good for controlling those details. So if you want to be able to do more, have more control, then use detail brushes. This is from our fine line. It's a whole collection of just detail brushes. So this is one of my favorites, the number 2 round, but it goes as far down as triple or quadruple 0, so really tiny ones. All right, so I'm going to start from the top again. So I'm going to use a really deep mixture now of the upper rose and the burnt umber mix. Okay, so when you want to darken colors, or when you want to, but you don't want to use just brown, you know, you can still add the color that you used and just add brown to it. Or you can mix the complementary color of it. So if it's red, it's going to be green, and then you can already create like a brown from it. All right, so I'm gonna add the breaks along the edge. Okay. So I didn't really sketch this. I'm just doing it by looking at my photo and just adding what I see. Okay, so you don't have to get this exactly, as long as you get the texture. That's it. Okay, so don't stress out about getting every dot, you know, making sure that they're in the exact place and things like that. Okay, because you know, macarons, they don't come out with the same cracks, so don't stress. Okay, so I'm just gonna add little dots here and there, and then you can always darken it later. Okay, so for now, just getting the look and feel of it. So now, as you can see, the shadowed cracks still have the color of the macaron, so it creates a more harmonious looking work. Okay, so you have to, if you have time, then you swatch out the colors that you're going to use, that you plan to use, and see if they work together. So that you won't regret, you know, sometimes certain blues don't look really good with certain other colors. So if you have time, swatch them out, create your palette, and see if they look great. Okay, now I'm gonna add a little bit water just to soften the color. Then add the tiny lines, the breaks. And then later on, I'm still gonna add another layer of like shadowing. Okay, so I do that over these texture. It also softens them, so they're not too dark or too hard edged. So again, that's up to you. Okay, so try things out and see which one you like best, because after all, at the end of the day, it's all a matter of personal preference. One thing that's you know, works for me might not work for you, or you might not like the finished look of that, so just try it out. Okay, so again, I'm gonna paint the inner part, the filling. So I'm gonna use the same but deeper. So I'm gonna start with this bright opera pink, and then just add another layer of the burnt umber and opera pink mix. Okay, so for this, you really, you just work in layers, and before you know it, you get the final look already. So watercolor really is about patience, mainly, so that you can practice your water control, and then of course your color mixing. So if you have a better understanding of color mixing, color theory, it really helps a lot. Okay, so this is the first layer for the filling, and then later we'll add another layer to deepen the color and then to add the shadows. Okay, so right now it seems like it's separate, so don't stress. There are still layers to go through. Okay, and then I'm gonna add shadowing here. So these detail brushes really make really great lines, fine lines. But of course, it also means that they hold less water. So this is the round, so it holds less water compared to the rigger, which has a longer tip. Okay, so now I'm gonna go to the green, and I'm gonna do the shadowing. This time I'm just gonna use olive green. Okay, and then I'm gonna mix it with a little bit of, well, let's just try this, just olive green, because the shadowing here is not too dark. Okay, so again, I'm just gonna take a look at my reference and check every now and then, just the general placement of the cracks. So just even it out. Some parts have bigger cracks, some parts have deeper ones, some parts that's just more of the little dots. Okay, so take your time, and the texture really makes it look more like the macaron. I haven't actually baked this or anything, but it's just I love the look and taste of it. Okay, so now let's go work here, down here. So you can totally do this over and over, different arrangements. I just really get my reference photos from Pixabay, because you can get, there are photos there free for you to use, no copyright issues. So just when you use your reference photos, just make sure to use ones that are not gonna give you problems later on. So there are many sites already that you can get photos from, or you can take photos yourself, of course. That's even better, because you can also train yourself composition wise. Okay, so texture looks great. Then I'm gonna add some shadowing already here. Just clean my brush and add water to the edge, and you can soften the edge that way. Okay, and I'm gonna add here as well on top. Okay, Okay, so later I'm also gonna add a little bit of pink here, because when you have objects stacking up or side by side, the color of this will also transfer here a little bit. So you have your reflected color or reflected light. So don't forget about that when you're painting. Even when your hand is beside or it's under a red table, for example, some of the red will reflect on your hand. So it will show. Just like this, some of the pink will also show up here. Okay. Here, not so much because the green is very pale. So, and this one is darker, so it's not going to show up too much. But if it's a brighter, darker color against a lighter one, probably more often than not, some of the color from here will reflect here. Okay, so now it's time to go here. Again, I'm just gonna go and use burnt sienna directly and then add a deeper brown. So now I'm gonna use brown ochre, so it's deeper, to deepen the color for the shadowed cracks. Okay, then just add the texture. Some parts have deeper parts, deeper cracks. So as long as you get the look and feel of it, that's okay. Add the little dots on the edge. Okay, so that's the nice thing about food, that you can explore the different textures and how you go about creating them. So I'm adding the lighter, brighter burnt sienna mix I did earlier already. Okay, so remember, if you feel like you don't like how it ended up, don't worry, you can still make corrections. You can still color lift. So here, I'm darkening the bottom part already. Okay, and before I forget it, this part at the top. Okay, so if you want to darken the shadows, just go over it again later with another layer, or another layer that's even more saturated. Okay, so just work in layers until you get what you're looking for. Okay, if you have more patience, then you can take your time and think about your steps. Okay. Actually, we'll remove some parts here, make this straighter. Okay, and then add the brighter parts here before I add the shadow later on. So So in this case, the reflected light, the reflected color is here on the green. There's some reflected orange. I'm going to add that now. Just a little bit. So don't go too much as well, otherwise it's going to look weird. So just a suggestion. Okay, and now I can go back here to the top and add my next layer. Okay, so let's add red ochre this time. So red ochre, it's a reddish, more reddish brown. So I just started with the bright pink below, the opera pink, and now I'm adding the red ochre on top. So it's gonna soften the brightness of the opera pink, but still allow it to show through to create that perfect color of the filling. Okay, and then I'm going to lift the part where there's reflected light. And just soften the edges. Alright. Now I'm going to add a darker brown directly, just to add the shadows. Okay, you can even use violet for this. It's also going to give it that deep color if you don't want to use brown. So here I used violet, quinacridone violet. To add the shadow. Okay, so you can also shade this way instead of using browns or blacks, for example. You can use the next darker color on the wheel, for example. So for reds and pinks, it will be purple to suggest shading. So just try it out. That's also another way to do your shading, like how Michelangelo did it for the figures in the Sistine Chapel. He would use, for yellows, he would use yellow orange or orange to suggest shadow. So you don't always have to create like the darker shade of the color using brown. Okay, so now I'm adding extra depth to it here around the cracks. Adding another layer. So now it doesn't look so flat, it has more depth and more form. Okay, I'm going to switch brushes. So I'm going towards the final steps now, giving more form to the macarons with another layer. Okay, so as you add layers of even just the same mixture, then you can already create depth. And here as well. Again, you can just soften the edge, just cleaning your brush and adding water. And now I'm gonna create the shadow under. I'm gonna add red ochre. Then a little bit of burnt umber. Create that shadowed section. Okay, and then softly allow the edges to bleed just to soften the shadows. And then this part has these parts have really deep shadows, so I'm just gonna go and get burnt umber directly and paint it. So with this one, I like to do this in layers. So I wait for the previous layer to dry, and then I add more. You can use deeper brown, of course, it's up to you. And then, like I mentioned earlier, I'm going to add some reflected pink here from the macaron on top. Okay, now using a deeper brown. And if you want to use black but not the flat black, then you can just mix your own blacks. Okay, that's also it's also covered in the color mixing guide that I mentioned earlier. So if you want to see the different ways of mixing your own blacks using your colors in your palette, then please do check out our color mixing guide. We have both for watercolors and for oil. And of course, what you can use for oil, you can also use for acrylic. Okay, so I'm not going to force this now. I'm just going to add layers later on. So for now, I'm going to go here and add the shadows between the stacks. Okay, so I'm just gonna go over this again later and add another layer to deepen the shadows between the stacks. I'm not gonna force it now because I'm just gonna keep lifting the layers under, which I don't want. Okay, so again, I'm gonna go over these parts just to add extra depth before I add the filling. Okay, getting there already. So the filling of this is like a cream filling. So I'm just going to use raw sienna very lightly and just go over it, wash it out, just to have that light cream color. And then I'm going to add shadow later. Okay, and for here, it's all one color. It's still burnt sienna. Then I'm gonna lift the highlight part. Okay, and then add shadows. Gonna add some yellow to it as well, just to continue with that warm color. I actually think I made this filling too thick, but anyway, I don't think it looks weird. Just darken the shadows. So here and there, just dark parts, especially those at the back where there's less light. Then here as well with the green. So you don't have to draw one straight line. You can just use suggestive lines because the eye will take care of the rest. If you do broken lines that somewhat connect, it tells your eyes that it's just one straight line actually. So sometimes if you don't want all those harsh lines, you can do the broken lines. So here I mixed the violet with the red ochre to create the deeper deeper shadow. And again, the violet here, then add red ochre. And I have the shadow that I like that doesn't look too off. Okay, and another one below. So don't be impatient. Sometimes if you're not getting it right in this layer, just wait for it to dry and then do another. Okay, and then finally below here, of course, this part will also be shadowed as it meets the surface. Okay, and then for your surface, don't forget to add the shadow. Okay, I'll do it quickly now, but just the first layer. Okay, so I don't like to use, I don't want to use gray for this because it's gonna ruin the nice colors. So I'm gonna use, I really love indigo. It's subdued deep blue. So I'm gonna use just a light wash of indigo and add the shadow. So this is the first layer for the shadow, and then I'll add another one later to, yes, there's shadow on the table, but very very soft shadow. Since the light is coming from here, the shadow is up to here. So the soft lighting also gives a softer shadow. So that's really what affects the kinds of shadows that you'll see on your objects, is the kind of lighting. So very bright lights also give really bright highlights and really stark shadows. But for this one, because of the soft lighting, it gives just the nice shadow. Okay. So we have to put the shadow so that our macarons don't look like they're floating. So I'm even gonna add the edges of the table. Just a suggestion that, you know, there's an edge to the table. Okay. And then I'm gonna add more later, but just adding the shadow really you know, centers your macarons, makes them look solid. Earlier it looked weird without the shadow, right? So there must be a cast shadow on the table. So again, this is up to you. If you want to use gray for your cast shadow, okay, go ahead. I like to use this because it's a softer kind of shadow. It's not too dark like gray or black. Okay, and then soften the edges. And then I'll wait for it to dry so I can add an even darker mark here around the macarons. But for now, this is what it looks like. Just a quick one. Again, you can even add more details, more dots and whatever. If you like, you can add even more layers. But for now, they look pretty solid and still yummy. Still has the colors that make macarons really great. So, but I think I'll add some more here. It's too light. Just now. Can't. Okay, there. All right, so this is finished. I hope you liked it. I hope you learned something from just watching me doing it. But it's really mainly color mixing, finding the colors that would work with your reference photo. Again, don't be chained to your reference photo, just have it as your inspiration. Okay, so I'm gonna flip stuff back, so don't get confused. Zoom out and then flip them again so I can show you my face. Okay, so here are the macarons. It took longer. I'm trying to keep it shorter, but I want to show you the whole process of how I do it. So I'm glad you learned so much. So I think next time would be perfect for how to paint metal or glass, just the simple basic techniques behind it. So here it is, and I hope you do it, and please share your own versions of the macarons. Okay, thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you next time. Again, Mondays. For me, it's Mondays, so bye.